Okay, let's unpack this. Think about those moments, in conversation where you just need to smooth things over a bit. Maybe someone thanks you or apologizes, or you just need that tiny pause to think. How do you bridge those gaps naturally?
Yeah, or even something that seems really simple on the surface, like borrowing a book.
Right.
Oh.
Could a straightforward library rule actually reveal something, deeper about a place?
Well, language is absolutely full of these subtle signals. They seem small, maybe insignificant, but they carry significant cultural weight. They really dictate how interactions feel.
Totally.
And yeah, sometimes even, like you said, mundane rules can offer these unexpected insights into values or maybe systemic challenges.
Absolutely. That's exactly what we're diving into today. We've got a really interesting stack of sources here.
Okay.
There's a short dialogue, some vocabulary breakdowns, explanations of, conversational nuances, and this very specific cultural detail about libraries in Indonesia.
So our mission really in this deep dive is to pull out the most impactful nuggets from this material. We want to help you not just learn some Indonesian words, but understand how to use them.
Yeah, how to sound more natural.
Exactly, more connected in conversation.
And yes, we will definitely get to that surprisingly specific rule about borrowing a book in one particular Indonesian library and what the sources seem to suggest it tells us.
Okay, so where do we start? The dialogue.
Let's start right where our sources did, yeah. With that short dialogue about lending a book, Maria says, "Itu tidak masalah."
Right, and Hendra replies, "Terima kasih. Kamu yakin?" Which translates to, "Thank you. Are you sure?"
Then Maria reassures him, "Tidak apa-apa. Saya punya dua. Kamu boleh simpan itu." Meaning, it's okay. I have two. You can keep it.
Wow. Okay. And Hendra's reaction is, "Apa? Kamu baik sekali." Or what? That's so kind of you.
So right there in that tiny exchange, we hit two really cornerstone phrases in Indonesian. Tidak masalah, tidak apa.
And our sources spend a decent amount of time on these. And yeah, for good reason. They are incredibly common.
And versatile too, right?
Totally versatile. Tidak masalah literally breaks down to tidak, the negative particle, and masala.
Which means problem or issue.
Exactly. So simply no problem.
And the sources really highlight its flexibility. You can use it just like we might say, "You're welcome" in English.
Yeah, pretty much. It fits in almost any situation, whether it's informal or, more formal settings.
Is there an example in the source?
Yeah, they give one, someone thanking another for a gift. Terima kasih atas kadonya. And the simple, universally accepted reply is tidak masalah. Semoga kamu suka.
No problem. Hope you like it.
Right. It just smoothly dismisses any sense of obligation or inconvenience related to the gift giving. Very useful.
Okay, so that's tidak masalah. What about the other one? Tidak apa-apa. Again, you got tidak for the negative.
And apa-apa, which is related to the word for what or anything.
So putting them together.
Yeah.
What does that come out as?
It comes out as it's okay or it's no problem. Sometimes it doesn't matter. But a particularly important use the sources point out is how it's used as a response to maaf.
Which is, I'm sorry.
Exactly. And this is where you really see that cultural weight come in.
How so?
Well, saying tidak apa-apa isn't just acknowledging the apology. It's actively signaling that whatever happened, the perceived inconvenience, it's not a big deal at all.
Ah, okay. So it kind of absolves the other person of worry.
Precisely. There's a classic example given. Maaf, saya selamat datang. I'm sorry I'm late.
Okay.
In the reply. Tidak apa-apa, saya juga baru saja tiba. It's okay, I just arrived too. See? It smooths over the apology, keeps the interaction comfortable.
Right, it's more active than just saying, okay.
Exactly. The insight here from the sources is how these phrases function way beyond just their literal meaning. They're like social lubricants.
Social lubricants, I like that. Managing feelings around obligation, apology, perceived trouble.
Unlike maybe a simple okay in English, which, depending on the tone, could sound a bit dismissive. Tidak apa-apa actively validates the feeling behind the apology and then dismisses the need for it.
That's a really useful distinction. Okay, social lubricants.
Yeah.
And speaking of sounding natural, like things just flowing, our sources also get into those little sounds and words.
The fillers.
Yeah, the things that fill space or manage the flow, what we might call conversational fillers or transitions.
Yeah, look back at the dialogue again. Hendra uses, terima kasih. Kamu yakin.
Right, just like we'd use or in English. It just buys a moment to think.
We all do it. And the sources mention others too. There's O, which seems to show understanding or like a dawning realization.
Like, oh, I get it now.
Exactly. The example is, oh, kamu pernah tinggal di Jakarta. Like, oh, so you used to live in Jakarta. That kind of discovery moment.
Okay, what else?
There's, oh yeah. This one's interesting. The sources say it expresses interest, maybe mild surprise, or even a touch of gentle doubt.
Yeah.
Kind of like that, yeah. Imagine saying, oh, hari ini, hari ulang tahun kamu. Oh, really? Today's your birthday. It's definitely more expressive than just asking the flat question.
Gotcha.
Yeah?
A, often used apparently to grab attention or just kick off a sentence informally.
Like, hey.
Sort of, yeah. A, sekarang jam berapa? Hey, what time is it? Like a casual tap on the shoulder in conversation, as the source implies.
Okay. And one more they mention.
Yes. Huh. This one seems pretty specific. It signals surprise or maybe asks for repetition because you didn't quite hear or understand something.
Like what?
Pretty much. The example is, harganya mahal sekali. What? So expensive. And the sources make a point to clarify that is used like this kind of exclamation or request for repetition.
Why apa?
While apa, which also means what, is strictly for asking actual questions like, apa ini? What is this? So different functions.
These little sounds, they feel so effortless when you hear native speakers, but they are actually incredibly tricky for learners to get right, aren't they? Oh, absolutely. But mastering them, or at least recognizing them, that's a huge shortcut to sounding, or at least understanding, much more authentic speech.
Yeah, they signal active listening, processing, maybe even a little emotional reaction in a way that just, plain words don't always capture.
Definitely. And beyond these really informal fillers, the sources also list some more formal transition words.
Okay, like conjunctions.
Yeah, basically. Things that connect ideas more explicitly, functioning like conjunctions or adverbs. Think omong,
which is,
by the way, or sebenarnya, in fact, actually. Namin, however. And there are others listed too. They structure more formal or complex thoughts, providing that logical flow when you're moving between different ideas.
Okay, got it. So from the really granular level of sounds and short phrases, let's maybe build on this idea of how specific linguistic or social tools shape interaction and access.
Right.
Because our sources take this really interesting turn into a cultural insight related to borrowing, but in a very specific institutional context.
The library part, yes. The National Library of the Republic Indonesia in Jakarta.
Yeah, tell us about that. These libraries sound pretty important.
They are, according to the sources, they hold significant national importance. They're described as non-departmental government bodies tasked with preserving national archives and knowledge. Really key institutions.
Okay. And one particular location, the source specifies the one on Jalan Merdeka Selatan. It has this unique regulation for members who actually want to borrow books to take home.
That's right. This is fascinating. To become a borrowing member there, you're required to provide your home phone number.
A home phone number, like a landline.
Exactly, and the source is very clear on this. A cell phone number or even a work phone number is not acceptable. It has to be the home phone.
Wow. Okay. Needing a fixed home phone line, especially now in the age of mobile saturation, that feels, well, quite specific. Why? Why would that be the requirement, according to the source material?
Well, the source explicitly states this regulation is intended to ensure the discipline of the borrowers.
Discipline. How so?
The implicit idea seems to be that a fixed home line is tied to a stable, verifiable address, making it easier for the library to track borrowed materials and ensure they get returned. Accountability, basically.
Okay. I can see the logic, maybe from their perspective.
Yeah.
But the sources also flagged this isn't uncontroversial, right?
Not at all. It highlights that this rule tends to disproportionately affect certain groups.
Like who?
Particularly students, maybe, or people who are new to the area. People living in temporary housing or boarding houses, places often called kaskus in Indonesia, who might not have a traditional fixed home phone line registered in their name or accessible to them.
Ah, right. So they can't meet the requirement.
Exactly. And that raises a really significant point the sources touch upon regarding access. While the rule might be designed for accountability, it inadvertently creates this barrier.
A barrier for potential readers.
Yeah, readers who don't fit that specific residential profile. The source mentions they can still read inside the library, they just need to provide some ID and sign a guest book.
But they're excluded from the lending privilege. They can't take books home.
Correct.
That's a really stark example, isn't it? How even a seemingly universal activity like borrowing a library book can be shaped by these very specific and maybe unexpected local regulations.
And regulations rooted in particular concerns, like this idea of borrower accountability.
Which then ripple out into these broader issues of equitable access, as the source notes.
It really shows how institutional practices, even ones with maybe understandable intentions, can have these unintended social consequences based on the assumptions kind of baked into the rules themselves.
Okay, so let's try and pull this all together. Circling back, we started with that simple dialogue about borrowing a book.
Right, which let us unpack the really essential social weight of phrases like tidak masalah and tidak apa-apa, how they function as those social lubricants.
Then we moved into the subtle but pretty critical art of sounding more natural with conversational fillers. The hmms and ahs and oh yeah, yes.
And we touched briefly on how more formal transitions like omang-amang or naman add structure when needed.
And finally, we took that surprising detour into the specific lending rules at the National Library branch in Jakarta.
Yeah, seeing how a practical requirement for accountability, as stated by the source, can unfortunately create these barriers to access for certain groups. It highlights broader cultural and maybe logistical dynamics at play.
Definitely. understanding both these, small linguistic details and these larger cultural points, all drawn directly from the sources we looked at.
It offers a really practical path, hopefully for you, the listener, to feeling more comfortable and maybe more insightful when engaging with Indonesian language and culture.
And that library detail, wow, it's such a powerful reminder that sometimes digging into the specifics, even just a single rule, can uncover some really complex issues.
Absolutely. Which leaves us with perhaps a thought for you to carry forward. The National Library's rule requiring a home phone number for lending.
Which the source states is about ensuring borrower discipline, but also notes is controversial for excluding certain groups.
Right. What does this single, perhaps unexpected requirement, as it's described in our sources, tell us about the underlying assumptions? Assumptions regarding, say, trust, accountability, and access to knowledge within that specific cultural and institutional setting.
Thank you for watching this video. Hopefully useful. Don't forget to like and subscribe.